I love this this space here, because this is a space for storytelling, and I really think that that's something that's lacking in our society, because often, who has the microphone is the one who controls the story of our society. Could be the politician or the minister is the one who has the right to tell the story. And if we think about, what are the stories that actually create the storyline for our society, you can think about laws and religion and these social norms that we have. And so I like to think that we are all the storytellers. We are all the authors of our own existence. And so we can think about, maybe how are things changing? And you can think about maybe gay marriage, or you can think about economics, and maybe the stories in the past aren't working for us now. And so we need to have social forums like this to give everyone a voice, to give everyone an opportunity to be heard, because everyone creates collective consciousness together when we have an opportunity to listen, and then other people's stories become our stories, because in that collective consciousness there's not really a separation between our stories once we get to know each other. And I think that's one of the big problems, is that we live surrounded by people. There's people everywhere, but you don't really get to know them or care about them until you have the chance to hear their story. And I think everyone has an amazing story to tell, but we just need a space of peace and respect where we can really just sit and listen and take on their story and make that part of your story. And so what I wanted to talk about today was about how we actually create the lives that we want for ourselves through our stories. And so for myself, I'm 37 years old, and from age 12 to 17, my story that I was telling everybody was that I wanted to be a chopper pilot. I was going to military college, I was in Army cadets, and I thought the best thing in the world would be a chopper pilot. And then when I got to age 17, I was sitting in high school class, chemistry class, and the teacher was talking about quadratic equations, and I could care less about quadratic equations, and my mind just kept drifting out the window to the sun sparkling off the ocean below. I live in St. John, and St. John High School is just perched right on the Bay of Fundy there, and I could not pay attention in class, and my mind just kept drifting out the window onto the ocean, and I pictured myself kayaking on the ocean, and I'd never kayaked before, and I just thought, you know what, I gotta get out of here. I cannot spend another day in class and not know why I'm here and not have any direction other than this dream of being a chopper pilot to go and be a chopper pilot. And that story isn't working for me anymore. And so I immediately went, when the bell rang, I went down to the high school library and I opened an atlas, and I planned out my life from age 17 to 35 of what I thought would be the ultimate story that I could have. And that story started off with a kayak trip from Vancouver to Nicaragua, to Cuba, to Florida, and back to St. John. So I imagined a 3-year kayak trip, and that I would have a web page, and that I would share my journey, my story, through this web page. And the internet was fairly new at that time, and there wasn't people doing blogs. The word blog wasn't invented, and so I had this desire to share my story, because I felt like my story would become like my resume, that no one at the end of my kayak trip is going to give me a certificate that says, okay, you did this, now you're qualified to do something else, and so I had to kind of validate myself, and I also had to I guess my dream was to be a teacher. I think that we're all teachers, and when we share our story, we have a platform to share our story, then other people get the opportunity to learn through us and from us. So I immediately, after planning out my life from 17 to 35, I thought, I need to commit to this. It's not enough just to be I want to do this. It's like some dream that's going to happen sometime, No, I'm going to say, no, I'm going to do it at this time, I'm going to prepare for a year. So I was 17. When I was 19, I was going to leave from Vancouver. And so I immediately walked out the high school library and started telling everybody this is what I was going to do. I wrote it in my yearbook. It was just like, and I'd never been in a kayak before at this point. So I got a kayak and I started kayaking to school in the morning. So 7 o'clock in the morning, put the kayak in my head, go down to the beach and kayak in the harbor and store the kayak by the pool. And this became my story. And little by little, by having this very clear vision of this is what I wanted to do, it was kind of fake it till you make it, you know, and so I created this name for myself, even though I wasn't that person that had those skills to actually accomplish this massive dream. I thought, you know, maybe this person is all about getting the max out of life, you know. So I could be anything. I'm just like I'm a blank canvas, basically. You know, I could be anybody, you know, and maybe by the end of this trip, I could have a myriad of experiences in which I could be a totally different person than the person that I am right now. And so I called this person Max, and Max was an acronym that stood for Motivational Academic Experience. And so my kayak trip was called Max at School, Living an Adventure Novel. And I did create a web page, solomax.com, and over the course of 2 to 3 years, I actually had 4 million people read my website, and it became in a textbook for the internet. In Brazil, students, when they're reading about the internet, they read about solomax.com and how it's an early blog, an early web journal, and so it, you know, what I was doing was something, you know, unusual at that time, but it was also unusual, obviously, because I wasn't an experienced kayaker, and I had people at that time. There was a lot of news groups, like kayakers would email each other, and they'd have these like listservs where you write a topic and then everyone comments on it. And so someone had posted that I was going to be doing this kayak trip and how ridiculous it was that I didn't have experience, and then people started betting on where I was going to wash up on shore dead. And so, you know, I was like, you guys are, you know, I don't care what you have to say. That's your story. You wouldn't do this, but I know I'm going to learn little by little. And so I eventually did get to central Mexico. And at that time, you know, I was living with native people in a village of 250 people, where I just kind of like kayaked into this estuary and found these people that were living like they've been living for 1,000 years. And when I say that, I mean they had dugout canoes and mud huts, basically, and it was like a whole other reality that I was stepping into, of people that were living sustainably and in community, where when you walk down the street, everybody looks at you and smiles, and they know like that you are someone worthy of respect, that has a totally different story than they have, and they're interested in you. And what I find is that maybe now that we're surrounded by people and surrounded by so much information, that we can kind of, it's too much, you know? It's like, I don't really have time to hear your story because I'm busy in my own story. You know, my story is like, it's like this, and you maybe you don't understand, and if I get involved in your story, you know, it's just too much, you know. So I think sometimes we disassociate ourselves, and you're separate than I am, and you know, so I really want to create spaces like this, and I really appreciate this space, because it's not exactly my ideal. I'm wearing the microphone, I'm talking to you, I'm talking at you, but I would like a space where maybe we sit in a park. This is a park, but we have a circle of logs or a circle of stones, and in that circle there's just a talking stick, and only one person can talk at a time, the person who holds that stick. And so maybe in every park, in every city, there's a talking circle, and you can go into the park at any time, and there's just going to be people sitting around passing the talking stick. And I believe that egalitarian form of community organization, of storytelling, would be life-changing for many, many people. It would be an opportunity to get to know people, not like, you know, in their space, in their living room, or on their terms, but on in common ground, where we all have the right to share our story. And so this is my dream. This is the dream that I want to pass on to you, and for you to make your dream, is that these spaces, these talking circle spaces, are revolutionary, and there's something that's very simple. It's not something that we need to build this big infrastructure, or there has to be a budget or anything. I mean, we can just sit around in a circle and talk, and I think that's what was really great about the Occupy movement, is that for the first time in a long time, the first time I could ever remember, we had people sitting in parks all over the world and just sitting in public spaces or on the doorstep of City Hall talking about politics passionately. And I find that's a rare thing, where you just have common people, bums and businessmen, basically together sharing their passions about how they see the world. And we can do that online. You can join a group, and be in this little corner of the internet talking about, whatever political ideas and whatnot that you have. But I think that our lives are a political act. The way that we choose to live our lives and the way we choose to live our stories is actually is a spiritual and political act. Every decision that we make and the stories that we tell are something that's going to rub off on other people. And so myself, I've chosen to live and tell my story fearlessly, and I call it growing up in public. And that means growing up in public means that I don't always look good to everybody, to people who like me. I would like to think that they like me no matter what, like they like the person that I am because I'm living my authentic self. And it may not always be cool, it may not always be real cool because I might do something that's stupid or say something that's not right sometime, but at least people, I would hope they would appreciate that I'm living my truth. And I would think that people, it may be different than someone else's truth, and it may disturb the underpinnings of our reality, of our social norms. And so there's a great storyteller, Charles Eisenstein, who's really big on storytelling and how storytelling is changing our reality. And so he's someone that's inspired me, and I want to encourage you to check that out. There was a movie called Occupy Love that he was featured in, and Charles talks about how the stories that we're telling are sort of the subliminal underpinnings of our mythology, and that our lives, if we choose to be more generous or outspoken about could be government and the way how government is run, or religion, or whatever it is, if you choose to live your truth, which may be contradictory, which may not be what the norm is, then it's like a political act. It's a revolutionary act. And so just by my very existence on the internet, being myself, or being here on stage for you right now, is actually a revolutionary act. And I would like to empower everyone to see their lives as not necessarily needing a stage or needing to be some public figure to change the world, but just simply being fearless in telling your story. Oh, thank you. Yeah. No, it's a matter of really believing, like knowing your story. I brought this. I don't need this. Because the reason why is because this is my story. What I'm telling you right now, I can't forget my story. My story is who I am. It's the fabric of who I am. And what I'm offering to you is that each one of us are like threads in the social fabric. And that when we choose to not tell our story, when we choose to not be ourselves, then we're actually making the social fabric a little bit thinner, and maybe we're not choosing to weave our story into everyone else's story, but we're just kind of allowing the big media and the big corporations to tell the story for us, and to tell us who we are and tell us what's cool. And so well, let's see, we got We got the microphone. We've checked that off. Oh, the storyboard. Okay, maybe I do need this thing. Okay, so I like to think of the calendar as a storyboard. So, or like the cells in a comic. And so I think it's too easy sometimes for our lives to be told for us, that we go through school. So we have 12 to 15 or 20 years. We're actually being told and brainwashed sometimes into what the story is and what we should do. And so I like to think of the calendar as actually more like a storyboard, and each day is a new chapter. And if we want to fill in our lives, it's totally up to us what we want to make our lives about. So if you think about, what is my life about? What do I want the story to be this year about who I am? And so I'm going to fill in before anyone else fills in what my life is going to be about, because there's social engagements, things that I have to do, whether that be family things or I go to a lot of music festivals and set up my hammocks at music festivals, and it's like people are expecting me to show up and do this. And if I don't do this, then I'm not being me, and I'm missed or something, and there's an expectation there. So before any of that, I want to get out of the schedule of everybody else. I don't want my life to become just like this routine that I go through, but I really want to be in the driver's seat. So so far this year, I tend to go away for 2 months each winter to Mexico or to Uganda or someplace that I love or have never been, and there it's a blank slate. Every day I wake up and there's no one expecting me to do anything. I just wake up and it's like today is a whole new day and there's a whole new list of characters, and I can make whatever story I want because nobody knows my story. Nobody knows my story, and therefore I can be anybody I want to be. And so I slot those 2 months in the winter to do that, but I've been back from Mexico several months, and my story has been a lot of hammock making, a lot of festivals, and I haven't gotten to rock climb at all. Yesterday I did some bouldering at Cape and Rage because it was very high tide, and so there's a cliff there where they rappel down, but the tide was right up to the bottom of the cliff, and so I was scaling along the cliff above the water, and I actually fell in the water because the rock broke, and I fell off into the ocean, and it was great. I love that, even though I got wet and I could have hurt myself. To me, that was really living. I mean, now I got a story to tell, right? But what's happened is that my life's gotten so busy that those moments of danger and risk and unknown are fewer and fewer, because I'm now doing so much, other things that are like other people are expecting me to do. They place orders on my life. And so what I encourage you to do are think about what you really want, what you really want your life to be about. What are the things, the core things about who you are, the core storylines, and then put those into the calendar, into the storyboard of your life, and make sure that those things, then you design your life so that those things happen. And you can even work backwards, where you place these things about, I really want to go to a country fair and take my nephews or something, and that's one story of something that could happen. And then you sort of go, okay, well, what do I actually do to make that happen? And you work backwards. So how much time do I have left here? Are we?
1 minute.
1 minute, okay. So I love to talk and I love to hear stories. And my dream right now is actually to create a storytelling festival. And the storytelling festival isn't a place where we, just make up anything. We all have a part to play in the story, in the festival. So if anyone comes to the festival and they don't know, what their role is, well, maybe they will, be given a role until they're inspired to think about what their role is going to be. But the story that I'm telling right now is about creating a festival where everybody has a role to play, and they know what their part is in that festival. And I think life is like a festival. You know, like in this situation here in this park market, there's many different things to do, and sometimes you can feel torn at a festival. You know, like, oh, I should be doing this or I should be doing that, or you know. And so it's really important to be present wherever you are, and to feel like where you are is where you're supposed to be. And so I really hope that that you have the opportunity to tell your story, and that you shine fearlessly in the world, and find your place in it, and not get too caught up in the schedule of everybody else, but that you can really create the life that you want for yourselves and others. And so I want to thank Dan for this opportunity, and Sean and the other speakers who are here to create an amazing opportunity for you all to hear other people's stories. So I'm getting kicked off stage right now. This is great. Thanks, Dan.